All right, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to another edition of the industry's premier cybersecurity podcast, the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Boy, do I have a doozy for you guys. Um, in the previous episode, we had Will on down below me here, and we talked a little bit about threat intelligence and what that's what AI is doing to that. And then we decided, you know what, we should round up the gang and just really go in on this. And so I've got a heck of a panel here for you guys. And the conversation today is going to be around AI and what it actually does for our adversaries, our threat actors out there. Because I think that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of bad supposition, and then just some outright bullshit. But before we get into that too deep, I'll let the guys introduce themselves. We're going to start with you, Kareem. Give us a quick one.
Thanks, Raf. Hey, guys. Karim Hijazi here, founder, CEO of Vigilocity. Do adversary interception, interdiction work, and figure out where bad guys have deployed their implants around the world without usually the victim knowing about it beforehand. Makes it great for conversation.
How appropriate. All right, Adam.
Hey, Adam Meyers here. I run counter adversary operations at CrowdStrike, and been doing that for a minute. And I like to hunt down bad guys.
There you go. And certainly, last but not least, Will.
Hey guys, Will Gragido here, co-founder and CEO of Salient Cyber. We're an advanced threat prevention capability for cyber-enabled AI threats as well as native and generated threats.
So lots of AI, lots of counter bad guy stuff on the panel. All right, guys, I'm going to start with this, and whoever wants to jump in and go. You've heard a lot about what AI can do for the SOC and all the wonderful things about how we're depending on who you believe. It'll either automate, enable, or simply replace. But lots of good stuff happening for the defenders. What is AI doing for bad guys?
Well, I'll start off that we had in our global threat report this year, we noted that there was an 89% increase in adversaries using AI over the previous year. And so adversaries have, just like everybody out there, figured out that, AI, I kind of think of AI as that Homer Simpson thing from this, where he's like, alcohol, the cause of and answer to all of life's problems. I feel like that's AI in the business world today. Everybody's going to be a black hat scratching XDR off their booth and putting AI or agentic on there. But adversaries have been using it, and they've used it in some pretty kind of predictable ways. Right, the initial way that we start seeing them is that they use AI to localize quick fix lures and phishing content and things like that to the language of the target. We've seen some adversaries using AI to generate fake content, talking about things related to the Iran conflict. There was some crazy fake content that came out of that. There was a picture of a missile hitting an aircraft carrier, which if you didn't look into it very deeply, you'd be like, oh, wow, the Iranians blew up an aircraft carrier. But in reality, the missile was a Soyuz rocket in full launch phase configuration. So it wasn't even like it had shed any of the booster rockets. And then the target was like the USS Lexington, which I don't think has been a threat to anybody since World War II. So it was, content like that. And then we've seen adversaries create malware using AI. There's something called FunkLocker, where the threat actor used Worm GPT, which is one of these kind of unlocked adversarial LLMs, and they used it to write the code, except for like lots of AI slop out there. It didn't really work that well. So, the cryptography was totally borked. We were able to reverse the cryptography, and the threat actor left their name in it, right? It was kind of like the Big Lebowski, right? Is this your homework, Larry? Except for it was Ahmed, and he was in Algeria, I think it was. So, there's things like that on the lower bar. And then on the higher side, you get things like Fancy Bear and the more capable threat actors using AI in their actual tooling. So Lame Hug is a great example where this was a tool that effectively, rather than having pre-built functionality, like every other piece of malware we've ever seen, it had prompts and it reached out to the Hugging Face API and it talked to it to use Quen32B and it used that to create Windows commands. And this is somewhat non-deterministic, which is kind of cool too, to profile the system, and then a second prompt that would be used to find and exfiltrate data. So, we've seen the whole gambit of things from adversaries using tooling in the AI space, and I think it's just going to get more capable and as time kind of goes on here.
Yeah, I'll double down on Adam's point on that. It's something akin to us veterans, to almost seeing another resurgence of almost polymorphism coming back into play, which is fascinating.
Geez.
Where it's starting to, at least what some of the stuff we've seen, and it's a lot of testing. I think that they're stubbing their toe, but in that process, they're learning a lot more every time they do it. At least from a force multiplication standpoint, AI has been really powerful for them. They're able to, for our conversation before we got on the call, they're able to shovel a lot more garbage and see what might work. A lot of testing going on, and then they're getting a lot of the gems out of that and refining, which is really interesting. In that, they're leaving a lot of traces, which is fascinating too. So it gives us an advantage to say, okay, well, that was a whole lot of domain purchases, for example, that were completely fruitless and useless, but they were trying to use LLMs instead of DGA sort of approaches, which is interesting. Thinking that was going to be a good way to not have a reversal on the algorithm around the DGA, but there's ways to figure that out, as you know, Raf and Will.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think for sure, totally with Adam, it's not going to go anywhere. They're going to keep, and I would even go so far as to say they might even been a little more innovative than some of the good guys in the early days, seeing what might work. They're more motivated to see if, what could happen versus some of the security guys, unfortunately.
I feel like the bad guys have all the have the edge on motivation and the lack of constraint and cost.
Right. Yeah.
You're gonna say they're using your tokens, then it doesn't really matter, does it?
For sure. API keys
exactly.
Out there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. They don't have the constraints like we were chatting about before. Of, economics of tokenization. It's not a problem for them.
Yeah. What are we going to go? Like, how is this going to go? Because it feels like there's a number of everything from better phishing emails, right? Doesn't sound like Google Translate anymore. We went from like bad spelling mistakes to bad translating mistakes to like, man, that actually sounds like something somebody would write. And on that end of it, right? Better phishing. And then like, you're talking about polymorphism and Adam, I think you said it, non-deterministic, or one of you guys said it, non-deterministic, like execution paths like that kind of scares me. Cause like so much of security has been built around pattern matching and identifying bad behavior. This sounds concerning.
Well, that's really the whole use case for anomaly-based detection, right? Like, think about, the way most adversaries actually get in today. They're not using malware. They're not using phishing with like the malware kind of lore. They're using phishing or compromised identities to get legitimate credentials to log in. So they're not breaking in, they're logging in. And there is patterns that you can look for there. If you abstract it away from the actual IOCs or trying to connect various dots, you could say, hey, if Ralph logs in from Atlanta every day, and then all of a sudden there's a new MFA incident and he's coming in from, Tennessee, or he's coming in from Ouagadougou or someplace like that, that's outside of norm. Like, let's contain that identity. Let's not let Raf touch anything until we call him up and ask him what is he doing. Maybe he is in Ouagadougou, but likely probably not. So, there is, I think if you pull away from kind of the traditional pattern in the very, heuristic kind of sense and move it more to behavioral activity, you're going to have a lot more success. And that's, ultimately where technology has gone. EDR technology has moved that way. Identity threat detection and response technology has moved that way. And now, AIDR, AI detection and response, is just kind of starting to emerge. And this is something that's going to look for patterning and behaviors. When I say patterning, I mean, anomaly behaviors of how people are using AI within the enterprise, right? Everybody in the enterprise is using Quad from, I saw one company put out like, good news, non-technical teams are now shipping code through AI. And I was like, great. But
Good news.
Yeah, but like as that happens, I think we're going to need to have more visibility, because even, AI is goal-based. And if you look at some of the things that AI does, if you run AI on a system with EDR and all this stuff on it, and you're trying to build something and it's like, oh, this EDR got in my way, let me quickly find a way around that, right? And you can actually see that in the thought pattern within the AI while it's kind of going through all of its processes. So, I think that that's going to be the next iteration, because I've been saying this for a minute now, that AI is the new insider threat, right? Non-human AI identities are going, if a threat actor can interact with it, even as simple as you've got an AI chatbot on your website. Now, I was joking before about not using my tokens and using your tokens. If your AI chatbot doesn't have the right guardrails in place, I can ask it to write Python code for me.
Yeah. All those skills that are being deployed left and right like crazy through GitHub. I mean, that all, we could get into, excuse the pun, rabbit hole on the whole, whatever, claw, whatever, open claw thing, that mess from a while ago.
Well, and even more of a problem, I think, there is this issue with the supply chain attacks that we've seen like almost every day. I feel like this week we've seen, TanStack and, I can't even remember them all from the past couple of weeks here, but that is a huge issue, and that's tied to AI, because people are not pulling down NPM packages 100 million times, for the same package a week, right? They're using AI to build something, and AI is like, oh, let me do that with Node. And
I sort of wonder, because we talked, and you mentioned, the anomaly base. Like, this makes a pretty damn good case to go back to. Will, you have this background as well as me. Like, all the stuff that we can glean from the network.
100%.
Right. It's time to start watching our networks again, because that feels like the only way. At least part of the equation is going to be like, what's happening? What's that device doing? Like, you're talking about where did the person log in from, but like that asset, what is it doing? Is it behaving like the norm? And I know we tried doing this like when I was back at early 2000s. I think it was. Remember? Was it Silent Runner? Is that what the app was called?
Yeah, my CTO is my co-founder and CTO was one of the co-authors, John Suit.
Nice. Well, so small world. So like the place that not to try to implement that at the time was on a network with 12 million nodes on it, because it exploded in ways nobody thought of. But like, I think now with compute and storage growing, like this feels like the only way we're going, because AI can behave close to a human in terms of, I hate saying it's thought, because it's not thinking, but it's behavior, it's execution processes, right? It's execution flow. It can, as you pointed out, it can alter its execution path if it finds a roadblock. Like, hey, that EDR is causing me a problem.
You know how I like to think about it is, you've heard that saying of a million monkeys on a million typewriters could rewrite the works of William Shakespeare in a million years, except for with AI, it's doing that a million times a second. Right? And that's really like what we're doing. It's just, and then it's picking like the best. It's doing a good job of figuring out what is the output of William Shakespeare supposed to look like, and that's really what it's doing. But I think that is a huge aspect of this, is that like it can find ways around it faster than we can find ways to stop it.
Also, it's interesting because AI fundamentally is probabilistic in nature. It's not a program by definition, which is what confuses a lot of people that aren't in the bowels of it. They tend to think it's got this definitive outcome and it's going to do this because they see the
it's not an if then.
But it's not an if then, right? There's an element of that, but it's probabilistic by nature, so it's looking for the most likely thing. So that works on both sides of the equation.
Would you say that that's specific to the like general purpose models, not the like domain specific models? I think would have much better determinism and much
because
better
of the training,
cleaner output.
For sure, for the training. But I think by nature, just by LLM in the way it was written, maybe some of the other more modern stuff like the energy-based models. I don't know if you guys have seen those. They're starting to emerge now. They're pretty interesting things.
What is it?
EBMs, energy-based model, not LLM. So it's a new. Have a look. There's one called Just slipped my mind. Knowledge? No, I'll find it. I'll let you know what it is, Ralph. So you can put it in show notes. Look for energy-based models if you can when you guys get a chance.
Like
that's a very different approach. In fact, the test that they did between that, and this is relevant to the question you asked, Ralph, they have a Sudoku test on their website, and literally they run an LLM against it, the top models, and then they run the EBM, and it's within milliseconds, and it solves the Sudoku model. Like,
wow,
pretty amazing stuff. So there's some really very interesting approaches to it. And to Adam's point, when you get into those specialized, not generalist tools, yeah, it gets pretty sharp pretty quick.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And you have to have something that can outwit and out-iterate and out-permutate generative AI and LM derivatives, right? I think that's one of the big challenges, right? Is that so much is happening on the side of the defenders and the adversarial equation, where the same tooling, the same training, largely speaking, right, the same foundations are at play. It's an arms race, right, in the classic sense, and maybe even in a greater sense than it ever was before. You need to have something that can move at speed or faster than it, that doesn't suffer from the same challenges that class of advanced mathematics and modeling suffers from, and that's important, you know.
Exactly.
I'm hoping Adam pops back in, because I just got a system crash on his. He's coming back. All right, good.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you asked about instrumenting networks. I think there's a lot of things that are influencing the need for that again, and that's not to say that it's not important to instrument hosts of all sorts. I think what we're seeing, and I think what we've been seeing for a while, several years now, is the shift back forward on premises and hosted data centers, and really a true heterogeneous approach to internet networking again. That's going to force the need to have comprehensive instrumentation. That has to include every aspect of the network, right down to the least important aspect of IP-enabled anything, whether it's an iPhone, or whether it's an IP-enabled camera, or whether it's an IP-enabled soda machine in the break room, right? If it's attached to your network, you've got to be able to instrument that, or at least have some kind of compensating control and comprehensive understanding of what it's doing on that network on a 24/7 basis. So I think it's going to shift a lot in regards to what's necessary for defenders to take advantage of on a day-to-day basis. It's going to force people. It's going to be a forcing action. It really is a forcing action for them to better understand not only what their networks look like, kind of in their totality, but also the patterns of behavior associated with the users on the network, as well as the adoption of tooling that they're being told from a business point of view. You've got to adopt this. You've got to take on your respective AI-enabled code producer, right? And you've got to use this to create a force multiplier so we can keep our costs down while we push out more product. And that, on paper, that sounds great. But it's a tough value proposition when people are really not looking at these things scrupulously in mass, and they're being encouraged to just adopt at a steady state. In some cases, very much so, without fully understanding what they're adopting and why, and what the ramifications will be within their respective ecosystem.
Welcome back, Adam. You had a system
little glitch there. I don't know what happened with this boom thing.
It went boom.
I don't know. I got a recording. I got recording failure, and all right, well, he'll come back. We're talking about. I think Will mentioned something that always makes me chuckle when somebody from security says it, because this is a thing that I've been hearing since I started. It's the whole notion of it's going to force us to understand our network. And Adam, it was one of your one of our mutual friends that I think it was. Gosh, I can't remember how long ago this was. That was telling a story from one of you guys, your adventures in helping companies restore and undo the bad guy damage. And he's like, we found a file that was on one of the shares of a compromised machine. It was essentially a network map, and the network map was more up to date than the customer had.
It's common,
which is
yeah. I've been in a lot of situations where somebody's been like, well, the administrator for this system is in Beijing, and we don't know them.
What?
I have a funny one. There was someone that was doing reconnaissance for a ransomware group, and got a hold of the payloads and got to look at the network reconnaissance that the bad guys had, and it was far more robust and articulate than they ever had on the internals of those guys. So, and this is all done surreptitiously. It's incredible. They did it without even telling anyone, and they had a better layout of the entire environment than the guys themselves had it.
But it comes back like this is the thing. It comes back to incentives, right?
Mhm.
Like the bad guys have a target. They're going to purpose, and I think I hate to say this, but I think AI is kind of uniquely positioned to be an aid in this space because they don't care how they get there. They just know what the objective is, right?
Yeah,
the
and
objective is go grab this data before it is made public so we can use it to trade for or against this company. Right.
And not to be doom and gloom, Raph, but like it's kind of what Adam was referring to with the slop piece. I'll use that word for the second time in this call. It comes twofold. The bad guys are using AI for their tooling and everything that they're, as Will said, force multiplying their abilities with that. And then we talked about it a little bit earlier, all this slop being pushed out by people who have no business building things, messing around, having a great time. That's just creating an insane amount of attack surface and vectors. That we never really, we'd had them before, but now it's just at scale. And
it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse.
Like, I have a 10-year-old and I set him up with Claude and I hooked up Claude with VS Code and he's writing Roblox games using AI. And, you know, I left him for like a few hours with it and I came back. I'm like, all right, so what'd you build? He built a freaking store and he was trying to sell shit to his friends because he was like, I get 80% of the Robux. And I was like,
tied to Stripe, ready to go.
I'm like, you're an entrepreneur, man. You're ready to go.
Yeah. That is that concerns me because as we increase inevitably by trying to do better, by trying to enable, we're putting this automation, this incredibly powerful technology in the hands of people that you really don't want to have.
But on the flip side, like I'll give you, like CrowdStrike has our Falcon intelligence service, and for the last 14 years, I've been asking for somebody to build a mobile app because do you want to get your intel when you're at a computer, or do you want to get your intel wherever you are because you need that information ASAP? Sure. Well, nobody could build it. Like nobody took it on. It just never happened. In 2 hours, I built an iOS app on a plane that did everything I wanted and more.
Oh,
it took me longer to get it approved in the App Store than it took to write the code. And then I sent it to our security team, and they were like, "Oh, there's 2 minor, security issues with this. If you could fix, certificate pinning and storage on the device, you're good to go."
You told Claude
yeah, and then and then
I wrote this on an airplane when I was doing ginger ale.
This worked out great. Now port it to Android and 2 hours, not even 2 hours, like 20 minutes later, I had an Android app that did the same exact thing. And it was like that unlocks the potential of people, which is, I think, one of the really cool things about AI.
Sure.
And, I feel like for so long, people have been stuck at the, not to be like an advertisement for AI here, but people have been kind of, stuck at the whim of the developer that like chose or chose not to take on their project or had a different vision for what the project should look like than they did. And they were unable to do it. Like how many founders out there are just like creating crazy startups using AI and like a couple grand in tokens?
Yeah. 100%. And all those projects that are arguably 70% good ideas, maybe that's generous, but 60% good ideas, really good people get a hold of and really run with these things. If you look at the GitHub explosion with the amount of stuff in there, a lot of it's garbage, a lot of it's slop, and it is slop, but if you take it and you refine it, it gets pretty interesting pretty quick. You can do some really cool stuff. And then conflating these. Now, sadly, I'm talking about the good. Well, I'm talking about the good side, which is the good side, but the same thing goes for the bad guys. They get
that's my concern, right? And this is the classical double-edged, sword here that we're talking about, right? Like it's a force multiplier. It can, Adam, as you pointed out, it can enable some things that have been sitting on a shelf for forever. Like, oh, if I could only find somebody who could write the code for this, like now you can, right? It costs you a couple bucks.
So here's, I think, my perspective on this, and this is a little bit nuanced, but bear with me, right? I think that the bad guys are going to have the same issue, right? In that the bad guys, like you think of like one of the e-crime groups, like what we track is Indrik Spider, the Evil Core, Maxim Yakubets, that whole crew, right? They have developers, they have people that have been trained as classic software developers, and they've they're doing sprints and all kinds of agile development on their ransomware, and like they're using the tools that they had. And for them to take on AI may slow them down, may cause them to do things that are not great, right? Now, on the flip side, scattered spider, like, and for this, I go back probably 10 years ago when iPhones and iPads were really being like very, very prevalent. And I was like, the kids today, like when I grew up, I learned about computers trying to get video games to work. And you had to mess with the autoexec.bat. You had to mess with, setting the HiMem.sys and all that stuff. Right?
Yes.
And using
DOS.
TCP/IP, like wind trumpet or whatever.
Trumpet windsock.
Yeah. So I understood all of the underlying components of the computer because I was trying to do that. And I looked like 10, 15 years ago, I was like, kids are never good. We're the last generation of hackers. They're never going to understand the underlying system and what it all means. Well, fast forward, scattered spider, they grew up with those iPads. They grew up with those devices. They were playing the online video games like Minecraft and stuff like that. And that's where they developed the skills that they use. And, they figured out different ways to hack in. They started doing voice-based phishing and they started targeting identity. And they went after the technology that they understood because they grew up with having to sign into massive online games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The kids today, my 10-year-old and the kids that are like him that are learning, about computers through the eyes of AI for the first time, and they're developing things that only, they can imagine and make, real through AI. They're going to be the next iteration of hackers that we really need to worry about. The next iteration of bad actors that grows up with AI, that's going to be
default.
That's going to be the next thing that we're going to have to deal with. So I don't think that today's adversaries, I think that they're playing catch up because they've been doing it a certain way for a certain period of time. They'll have some incremental gains. They'll have, some successes. They'll have some failures. But, 8 years from now, the kids that are currently talking smack to each other in Minecraft and wrecking each other's, stuff, they're the ones that are going to be the next iteration of adversaries. And they're going to be doing stuff that us back here in the past are never going to be able to figure out.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, the paradigm shifted. I mean, Adam, I'm with you. I used to sort of pick on that group, the point and clickers of the world that had no idea how to use command line or had no idea what the fuck assembly was and any of that stuff. But the reality is, man, I mean, almost doesn't matter. It sucks to say it. I hate to admit that. Makes me feel fucking old. But it's true because, frankly, now I have to learn that stuff now. I got to get into the abstracted world of how that stuff works and catch up with the vibe coders, not the other way fucking around. It's like,
it's funny you say that because I did that a few weeks ago. I had 7 Claude agents running simultaneously working on a code project for me. And I was like, I'm going to figure out how to freaking vibe code and get good at it. And literally, I was doing it for a week and I got a call and they're like, hey, about your token usage. And I was like, fuck.
Yeah. It's impressive, I have to say, though, this is actually very appropriate for the conversation. I was skeptical of it. Will, you and I talked about this actually probably last year around, call it August-ish. And I swear, between August and now, and the last time I really took a whack at it, I've been busy, so I haven't had a chance to go mess with it very much with the new models that came out with. But right around when Opus or something, Claude's
that was a tipping point. 4.6.
Man, I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. This is actually legitimately amazing how fast. And it's to your point, Adam, I did exactly the same thing with my kid. And he did his first platformer game, and it was like he was having it was just the level of exhilaration he had with that was so intense. I think I created a monster because now it's only going to get more interesting for him, and he's going to start to explore different ways. It's actually motivating him to learn a little bit more of how the code actually does work, which is kind of cool. So I know we're not getting into the adversary side of it, but that's probably what young adversaries are doing too. So
but that's how it always begins. Yeah,
for sure.
It feels like we're in that. So Adam, it feels like we're in that in between era, right? Because we learned the very, very ground bits and bytes, how a file system works, why, which memory is better, like all these very, very basic low level things. And I learned when I learned programming on MIPS RISC and assembler. Like that's the only thing I was ever actually good at, that in NCC, but we don't, that's dating far too much. And then there's
Richie would be proud to hear that.
What's that?
I said Kerrigan and Richie would be proud to hear that.
Yeah, right. There was a whole bunch of like people between us and now that didn't have didn't have to start at the low level knowledge. They didn't necessarily start with it, but there's no support. There was no support for them to kind of like jump that bridge. So there's like this intermediate squishy, and now you've got this AI first generation who's going to look at us and go like, you guys are dumb. I just have the computer do that for me.
Yeah.
I've often wondered.
You're going to be a dinosaur. You're going to be like, why are you stuck with the old way? Like, why are you like doing that? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, going to be Adam.
Okay, boomer.
But it's interesting, and it's what Will was talking about. Adam, you kind of kicked it off. It's still funny because there's dark art shit that people will never really get unless they commit themselves to learning it. Things like DNS.
Yeah,
that's fundamentally completely unknown to the world now. The younger generation, they don't know what that is really.
Well, exploit development too, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Rootkits, things like that. I mean, you can get Claude to do it for you, but they're not going to know what it really is going on there.
Yeah, but you like, so that's a great point, right? Like, you get Claude to maybe try to find an exploit for you, and like we're part of Glasswing. We've been playing with this stuff, and it can find bugs and it can try to weaponize bugs. But when you try to do that in reality, right? Like, it's one thing to look at source code and find a theoretical bug that you could write a proof of concept for. It is something completely different when you're dealing with ASLR or ASLR, and you've got to figure out how to chain together, gadgets and ROP gadgets and do all of this stuff. Like, it's just not going to do that well. And even if it does it okay, you as the developer, you as the person that's asking it to do that, you have to understand.
That's right. You have to have the domain knowledge. Yeah. You really do. We talked about that earlier, right? Is, in the right hands, with the proper amount of understanding about programming and development and even building products, right? In the formal sense, in addition to the domain, it's a colossal force multiplier. You still have to take your time and you still have to scrutinize all the output. You'd be foolish not to. But I think that, people are there's this misconception that if I just push the button, it'll do everything for me and it'll work flawlessly. And that's happening naturally. I think to your point, it's happening certainly grossly in the non-adversarial world, but it's going to happen in the adversarial world. I think that will represent a lot of opportunity for defenders to leverage that core competency in that. Now, how things work is really important, irrespective of the layers of abstraction from that, right? If you don't understand the OSI model, how a packet moves from host A to host B across the internet, you're going to be at a fundamental disadvantage, irrespective of what LLMs you've got. At some level, you'll have challenges eventually, because you won't necessarily know what to look for if your models aren't performing the way they ought to, right?
Yeah, but I think that's why the slop code is what it is, right? Because people don't understand some of those underlying concepts, so they're just like, it's not working. Like, do it better, and then the AI is like, absolutely, you're right. Like, so there's.
You're right. I'm not doing this well.
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah.
Can I tell you guys something? I've actually been vibe coding this entire podcast.
That's killer, man. It's awesome. No, it's so funny you bring that up, because, well, to your point, last time I was messing with this heavily, it was interesting because I was trying to have it look at something specifically, and it was a security product, allegedly. And it was kind of a firewall-esque thing. And I was like, hang on. And it kept trying to figure it out from, again, that abstracted layer down, because it's back to the training thing, like Adam was talking about with specialized versus generalized products, right? And then I was like, you know what? Go figure out how this relates to things like IP tables, which last time you heard that term.
Right.
And it went and it did its digging, and it was like, and then it immediately figured out the problem, it figured out how to bypass the whole thing. Because it went to the root of it. It went to the baseline of how these firewalls really work.
Not BPF.
I should have done that. That's actually a very good point. But yeah, I was like, go the direction.
Knowledge,
That's exactly right. But yeah, I was like, just go that direction. And it was like, it almost arguably looked excited when it figured out all this shit quickly. It was like, fuck, I didn't even know all this stuff was the underlying aspects of all the branding that firewall technology sort of had put in place and the abstraction of it all. So yeah, it's a really good point. Like, it's exactly right, Adam. If you throw something like PBF at it, you get it to go, oh, I see this entire compendium of information that kind of gives me an underlying bypass of a lot of these things that actually exist. It was just interesting. So how you point it, how you weaponize it or direct it from a good side or a bad way is I think that's the key. And as people get better, like our kids, you know, they're going to start getting more and more clever. They're going to start saying, all right, what's a lower level of this thing to understand what I really want to achieve? Like, for example, when I started vibe coding, I didn't really do it well. I started messing like around the classic way anyone else does. And then I started getting better about it. I was like, okay, let me give it a PRD to work with. And let me stage that PRD out. And then let me get it to build this part without confusing it with this next piece. And I got, you know, I basically gave it more fundamental or you know, first principle approach to doing it. And it got better. It did a much better product.
Yeah, the more structured you are. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. And that ties to the domain.
Have you messed with any of this stuff to like minimize your token usage?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Like the caveman thing.
Yeah, there was another one I found. It was an Arvix report that talked about how to like keep memory eternal with it, which is really cool. So context windows stay longer, and you can do a lot cooler stuff that way, which is
you like pull the context window out and store it somewhere. And
yeah,
then,
exactly.
Then you get multiple agents having access to the same context window. The one I was thinking of though was like, did you ever see The Office?
Yeah.
And that guy Kevin is like, why use many word when few word work?
Yeah.
So like they basically implemented that as a harness around Claude. So like it just like doesn't give you these flowery like long answers.
All the adjectives.
Yeah, like this stupid not work.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know, this is kind of where I figured this conversation would go eventually. Is that like anything else out there, there will be advantages and disadvantages. I think it's going to be whether we. It's like everything else in IT. It comes down to how well implemented it is. I'm genuinely. What's that?
And luck.
And well, there's always I mean, like half of life is luck, but you know, was it fortune favors the bold? So like go out and go out and give it a shot and make your own luck. But I think it's going to be interesting because there's parts of the world where you've got like advantages in terms of like the economics, Russia, right? The economics make it a good place to go be a bad guy, right? The economic incentives are there. The legal framework isn't going to come after you. Like and I think AI, especially as we see some of this stuff, I think move to out of these big commercial models into like local. What's that?
The commoditization of it. Yeah.
It's going to come out. It's going to go. Models. Yeah, it's going to go fit on your mobile device, on your laptop, and it'll be really good. That really makes the idea of carrying like super as people like to say, military grade weaponry with you anywhere you go. That becomes. I think that just. Forces it's going to force us to up the game on the defender side fairly aggressively, right? Because the bad guys want to do that because they have a financial incentive. Our incentive is hopefully to do well for the greater good, whatever. But like if we don't align incentives properly on the defender side, we are going to get just absolutely tsunamied.
Sure. Well, and with all the utmost respect for the big guys, Adam, out there doing things that are really cool, it also does come down to the economic side of it and the business case, which is how much do you want to start sort of throwing everything you have in the trash for all intents and purposes and versus retooling and how much of this comes through innovation internally versus acquisitions of smaller groups that really know what they're doing and cool stuff. I mean, that's the other problem too now is I think we're finally coming off the contact high of all these. It reminds me of I told a story the other day about Meerkat and Periscope. Funny story about South by Southwest when they pulled the plug on Meerkat when Twitter bought Periscope, and because they were using the fire hose from it, they pulled it right as they were demoing it on stage at South by Southwest, and the whole damn thing collapsed in the middle of the demo, which is brutal. But that's very similar to the situation with all these wrappers around all these models, which people are building startups around, hoping that this is going to make them millions. And they realize the entire thing hinges on this one API that they've got. Yeah. And it's over. So once that clears out, then we maybe have some stuff.
That's what happened even before AI though, right? Like how many startups like in the cyberspace were basically a UI wrapper around something that
Absolutely.
Basically like, oh yeah, like you still need to have this asset management thing from the 90s, but now it's pretty.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good point. So I think once there's true, kind of embracing of it, and you can get the marketing and the PR guys off your back about, no, we keep pushing the conventional product, let's don't ruin this. We've got a huge amount of money put toward that, because it's political internally for sure. I can't blame the big guys.
And organizations are going to stay. I mean, how many organizations are still paying for, like Symantec and McAfee, right? Like AV products that have long outlived themselves.
That arms race is way over. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But that brings me that brings it to an interesting question for you guys. Then is, like we've all said, the big old dinosaurs, McAfee, Symantec, HP, IBM, like those that made those ancient security tools, like, all right, this is eventually going to have to be superseded, and people will eventually realize, like, this is old tech. We're going to move on from it. Like, is this the point that we finally move off of? No. Adam's like, no.
Somebody is just auto renewing that license because that's what they have for security. Like, oh, can't get rid of that. It's our security. I mean, it's crazy. In 2018, we were calling legacy AV fossilized.
Yeah, and, well, because it was.
It was, and now it's freaking oil. Like it's past fossil. And so, but it's still, people are still renewing it. Like I literally cannot fathom why you're running, 90s AV in today's world.
Can I ask you a question that, Ad? This one, I'll direct this one directly at you. And actually, Will, because you guys are doing exactly this. Are we looking at an entirely new class of defensive assets? I mean, Will, what you're building is entirely new.
I think so.
And what does that do to the EDR, the pat? All reverence to the way you guys do things, Adam. Like, but there's a lot of your industry or EDR space that still does pattern-based recognition and response, right?
I think it affords people the opportunity to look at ways to get as much value out of that incumbent technology as possible, while they recognize and understand that the landscape has changed, and that ultimately, right, there is a new echelon of threat out there that has to be addressed by new and in some cases kind of exotic forms of defense. In some cases narrowly focused, and in some cases more broadly so. So I think it requires kind of a dualistic approach. You've got to be sensitive naturally to what people have. Adam brought up a good point. There's reasons people renew. Sometimes they're maybe rooted in sounder thinking than not. But there are reasons that they renew what they've got. I've got, whether it's emotional, whether it's political internally from a political point of view, whether it's vendor lock driven. There's all sorts of reasons why people renew what they renew, even if it's underperforming or maybe not completely and utterly not performing, non-performant, but at the same token, I think there's room for, and there's definitely a need to look at net new classes of defense. And I would argue that those net new classes of defense are not going to be relegated to things that are cleverly wrapped, GPT wrappers, right, at all. I think that people will eventually see, through that, either just due to education and or having maybe the misfortune of selecting technologies that are just that. It's a wrapper, a GPT wrapper that is very much dependent upon an API that if someone decides they don't like how they feel, is no longer available, and subsequently not only is that technology rendered useless, but also the valuation of that particular organization is forever rendered useless or decimated, right? So I think there is room for change. Doesn't mean that there isn't value though. Like for example, in our case, we're very clear and quick to point out that even though our first products sit on the user edge, and we define it a little more broadly than just the host, the classic host, that we don't compete with EDRs. We have a complementary value proposition because we're focusing on different problem areas, and we're not approaching things technologically in the same vein. We're not, for example, shimming into ring 3 or ring 0 to the extent you can do that today, right? Given the nature of OS maturity and what's gone on architecturally with regards to OSs in the last several years. So I think it really boils down to understanding what people do, and what technology classes do, and understanding how to articulate and direct people toward the right path that makes the most sense for a comprehensive solution. And I think it gets, honestly, Ralph, I think it's going to get back to, we talked about what's old is new again. it's a new era for defense in depth. There's reasons to have different technologies performing different tasks, and there's reasons for specialized technologies to come, best of breed, if you will, to come back to the forefront of things. That doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. That just means you look at things holistically so you get the most value out of it.
Yeah, the baby out with the bathwater was kind of where I was thinking too. I think that's right. But the fact that you have to have host security doesn't change, right?
That's exactly right.
You have to have network security. That doesn't change. That's why you have SIM, a next gen SIM, where you're taking the data from those network devices, and now you're kind of making it more accessible and making it something you could actually hunt on. But I think the host security doesn't change. I don't think it disrupts the EDR space, but I think what it means is we have to add more layers on top.
That's right.
So
exactly.
More folks are moving into AI. There's a lot you could do from the EDR space to track, the use of Claude, because Claude is a binary. It's running as a process tree. Like, we can track a lot of that stuff at the EDR level and see what it's doing and what it's touching and how it's behaving. There's an additional layer of analytics you probably need to put on top of that. But I think we're well suited to that particular problem set. But what we can't really do at this moment is we can't introspect what is the user doing in that AI, right? Like, you can't see what prompt they're sending because it goes from that binary through encrypted API to the cloud where they're actually doing the work and then pulling the results back. So that introspection, that's where, when you talk about something like CrowdStrike, we always do, mergers and acquisitions is something that you can do as a bigger company, and you do it as a smaller company too. But, like, we look through the windshield, not the rear view when we're doing M&A. So we acquired Seraphic because of the visibility that gives us into the browser and lets us actually see what's happening. Potentially that we can get some of the data about the prompts and things like that through the browser. We're also, we've acquired Pangea because that is AIDR. It's one of the first AIDR platforms. So there's a lot of tech that we've stacked up. Things like our entire identity stuff was all based off of acquisitions as well. But there's I think a right way and a wrong way to do acquisitions. And I like to think we're doing it the right way to the extent that we can. And that is, one of the things that, everybody should keep in mind when we think about security is, you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as Will said. We're going to need to figure out how do we kind of change the bathwater with the baby in there.
Right. Hey guys, I apologize. I've got to drop for another engagement.
Yeah,
this was awesome talking to you guys and seeing you guys.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll rock this off because we've got we're probably way over on time anyway. But thanks, Will. It's great having you. All right. So
can we talk shit about him now that he's gone?
Yeah, let's talk about Will while he's gone.
First person to leave the podcast, everybody talks shit about him.
Listen, so where do we wrap this up? Because I mean, we could keep going, but in different directions on this. But I think the fundamental question I asked at the beginning was, what is the general availability of more and more advanced AI models, and particularly agentic, where we're going specialized training, right? So we're getting away from this super broad down to something that's built to execute specific tasks. With the combination of knowing that these are probabilistic, not deterministic, which makes pattern recognition a little bit more difficult or impossible if depending how you see it. Does this truly give the attacker a short-term advantage while us on the defense scramble to try to figure out how to catch up? Or is this just going to be is that a statement I can make broadly, or is this just part of the ongoing arms race?
I think you landed exactly on the word I was about to say. You can't discount the political nature of it now, which was something that this is fairly unique to this one, sort of, more so than the way that birth of internet, birth of other products, birth of blockchain, right? This is different in that way, where Chinese gave us a run for our money with some things that happened in the last several years, kind of threw us for a loop on the fact that they're actually innovating some pretty interesting stuff. I'm not saying it's not on our backs, okay, but it's still, dangerous in that regard, where there's newer things are coming out that are being delivered in an open source capacity, where you can start using these models like Worm GPT. You can start plugging it in all kinds of engines or models or whatever that aren't necessarily these frontier models from the States that you can get, someone to sort of politically limit. So that's what makes it interesting to me, because I don't know that we're in this closed bubble or echo chamber the way we might have been before. It's now much more expansive, and there's other players with different motivations building things that are as effective, if not maybe sometimes even more effective for bad guys than what we're doing in some ways. So that changed the dynamics in a big way. We already talked about the commoditization of it. Shit's going to end up on your phone sooner than later. The cost of tokens are going to go down. Sooner than later, you're going to see CPU, not GPU, capable things, which changes everything entirely. Then again, where you're talking about people that don't even need to buy the kind of hardware necessary to get these things to work in a way. For some of the specialized stuff, I'm not talking about these big things. I'm talking about like if you really wanted a targeted thing. I'm sure it's happened. I just don't know that we've seen it fully yet. But that gets scary when you start seeing it come down to that level of hardware, because that might have been the limiter for a while. I don't know that it is anymore.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned token costs coming down. Do you think token costs are going to come down or go up? Because I feel like everything's subsidized right now. Yeah. Like it was like with cloud, right? Like for you've got like, hey, it's really cheap. It's really cheap. Once everybody's on it, suddenly it's like 10x comes.
That's how crack cocaine works, man.
It is.
Get them hooked and then jack up the price, right? Like that's the model. I think that there's going to be pushback on the tokening model from the CFOs, from the finance orgs. I mean, you can't be like, oh, like look how more efficient we are, and then, oh no, my camera crapped out.
Good Lord! All right, finish your sentence.
Yeah, I'll finish it out. So yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to see pushback from the financial orgs, and they're going to have an impact on the business model, and some of this will get more commoditized and drive the price down. But I think in the short term, it's going to stay high, and that's going to continue to be an issue.
All right. Well, Will's gone. Adam, AI has taken over your camera. I think this is a good spot to end. I feel like we should do this semi-regularly, so I'll get you guys back on.
All right, sounds good.
Adam, thanks for joining. Karim, always good to see you. Will is already gone. Folks, thank you so much for listening. This has been really fun. I hope you walked out of this with more than just despair. It's like there's hope, but we have to figure out the path to it. As opposed to like hoping that it shows up magically, because I don't think that's going to be a thing. So thanks for joining us. We will catch you guys another time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. And I'll see you guys later. Take care.